Welcome to Dollars and Dwellings. I'm Patrick Diamond.
And I'm Ralph DIBugnara. Welcome to our podcast.
All right, so we're here in July 2023. It's, in terms of the real estate world, it's sort of a crazy world out there. We got record low inventory, booming demand post-COVID. From a demographic perspective, you have millennials, who are the biggest age demographic right now, approaching home buying age. Tie that all together with a historic rise in interest rates in 2022 into 2023, from essentially zero to now 5.25%. Everything I see and read, Ralph, kind of says affordability is the worst it's been in a long time. What are you seeing on the mortgage business side and the buying side?
I've never in my lifetime, and definitely not my career over 20 years, been in a market where it was high interest rates, high prices, high cost of living, everything kind of at the same time. But it doesn't seem to be slowing down home buying. The biggest problem we still have now is that we're at record low inventory still, which means there's less houses for sale than we need. We need probably, in a healthy market, somewhere between 5 and 6 million homes for sale. There's somewhere around between 1 million and 2 million, depending on what time of the year it is. So we're nowhere near, and there was a shortage before the pandemic, so now it's been exacerbated. But you still see a lot of buyers out there, still bidding wars, still homes going for over ask. And I think people are looking at it as twofold, right? I think the smarter people are saying, I know interest rates are higher than it usually is, but if I don't buy now, if interest rates do drop, which inevitably, whether it's 2 months, 12 months, or 24 months, they probably will drop again. Mm-hmm. What does the feeding frenzy look like then? So I think people, like, some people have to buy out of need. They have no choice. I had kids. I'm moving. I need to, whatever. And people are still buying. And I think I tell people always is that, is the mortgage payment that's available today something that fits your budget? Yes, then it's a good time to buy real estate, and as long as you have a long-term plan. But it's an interesting market.
Give us some numbers you're seeing on the mortgage side in terms of, like, from what you told me, they haven't fallen off a cliff.
No.
I would sort of expect, as mortgage rates have creeped from 6 into the 7s, you'd see a fall up in demand. But you're not seeing that?
I mean, the refinances have fallen off a cliff, right? Because the stat that was put out by Fannie Mae the other day, I believe, is that 90% of homeowners today have an interest rate below 6%, and 75% have an interest rate below 44%. So most people aren't refinancing at this moment, right? So those are. I have
a 3% mortgage, and I'm certainly have no plans to do anything with it for the time being.
Yeah. So that's stopped refinances, right? Purchases are down probably 30 to 40% from their heights. They're probably 10% off, 10 to 15% off from the normal market. But the thing that's kind of creeping up, and you sort of mentioned this in your intro, is that from what I'm reading, consumer debt is at the highest level it's been in 20 years. The level of consumer debt and what they're paying, an average interest rate, just for comparison, during COVID, when mortgage rates were 3%, the average interest rate for somebody who had good credit was 14%. Mm-hmm. The average interest rate now for somebody who's got decent credit is somewhere between 23 and 27%. Right. So if you're building up credit card debt, which a lot of people are doing at this moment, at some point that's got to get paid off from somewhere. So people who have all this built up equity in their houses, I do believe that if interest rates drop anything significant, you'll see a lot of refinances start to kind of creep back in. Yeah. So it's an interesting time.
And to make it an even more interesting time, I mean, from a planning perspective, you have sounds like student loan payments are going to come back in the near term. So borrowers and young professionals, and I guess even old professionals will have to start paying student loans again.
It's been dormant.
That's been dormant. Yeah. And I like to look at Bank of America puts out they have this Bank of America Institute that puts out some good data on savings and checking balances and credit card usage. But people say that, like, the COVID stimulus, bank account balances are still higher than they were pre-COVID, which I guess is attributed to, like, all the stimulus that got pumped into the system. But it's getting spent down. So whether it's 6 months left on that or 12 months left on that, I think people expect those balances to come down. So it's hard to forecast, I think, where things go from here. Yeah. But It's a crazy. It seems like from a real estate perspective,
it hasn't slowed it down enough.
And it's a crazy time.
No, because I think prices are still rising. So, however you look at it, and I think if you look at different generations, right? And it's interesting. Millennials kind of came up in a time of a market crash, right? So like their first really either first dipping their toe into the market or they're seeing their parents or their families was market crash, or it makes you scared of buying a house. So I think that generation, although they're the biggest buying generation right now, has been cautious, millennials. You know, baby boomers and the older generations are in a weird spot right now because if they want to sell or retire, and I'm sure you're seeing retirees kind of talk about this, where do they go? They've been priced out of markets at this point now,
Right.
especially on a fixed income or fixed retirement or whatever. And then you have the newer generation, Gen Y or Gen Z, whatever we're calling it. I think it's Gen Z that's coming up next. And they're interested in buying homes because I think came up in a market that was hot, right? They were like, buy real estate, buy real estate. Everybody's a real estate professional. Yeah. So they have a high interest in buying real estate, but they necessarily haven't. They're at a faster pace from what I've seen stat-wise than the millennials were, but it's still slow right now because of kind of what's going on. So I think that comes into play a lot too. Like generationally, where are people and what are their real estate buying values?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I certainly have clients who are approaching retirement soon in the next couple of years, and they're freaking out a bit because they've been priced out of markets in Florida and Jersey Shore, places where you want to
retirement places, yeah,
or where you want to get a second home. But a lot of what's going on right now also reminds, and I don't know if you feel this way, but it reminds me of 06, 07. Like I got out of law school at the end of 06, and I just remember, I mean, post financial crisis, real estate was nuts then, and I was like, all right, I guess I just don't own real estate. Like, just doesn't happen for our generation.
Yeah.
But then obviously
got into it.
The financial crisis happened, and that was mortgage driven, so prices fell off a cliff, and that's actually 2010 is when I bought my first property.
Yeah, so but it ended up being an opportunity for you.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk of recession. I mean, people have been calling for a recession in the next 6 months for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So, it'll come at some point because it has to. That's just how the business cycles work. But whether it's going to be in the next 6 months, the next 12 months, nobody knows. But yeah, I mean, right now it's hard to see what is going to what's going to slow demand down to make affordability better. And I don't have an answer.
No, I think that Robert Kiyosaki, who's the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, he had some kind of statement in the last week or so that he said he feels like something's coming, right? Like we're on the brink of disaster. So buy things that can't be taxed and are going to rise no matter what. There's not that much of that stuff. So he's still talking about gold and silver, and he mentioned Bitcoin, which is here and there, and he mentioned Wagyu cattle.
This is not a Bitcoin podcast.
Yeah, this is not. Yeah. he mentioned Wagyu cattle, but I contend that real estate fits that, right? Mm-hmm. If real estate can be taxed more than it's being taxed now, but your taxes are going to only go up kind of incrementally. Your taxes don't rise like that on your properties. They will, but slowly over time. It's not a jump.
Yeah. And we're hoping to do an episode that kind of
addresses that. Yeah.
Yeah, that dives into sort of the nitty gritty of taxes.
But I think if you feel like we're on the brink of recession, or the best thing that the lessons I learned from 2008 to now is that most of my money that I have invested is a lot of it's in real estate, right? And I know where it is at least. Now, the access I have to it may get more limited if we go into recession, but I still can have access to capital so I still think that as a long-term investment, real estate is still one of the safest investments. And I'm sure you look at a million different things. So I'd actually be curious to see your view on that, like as far as security.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as as a financial planner, I say, owning real estate is just a great part of diversifying your assets from your 401k to your investments to, the home you own or an apartment you own. So it certainly has a place in everyone's balance sheet. But maybe this is a good place to stop because we want to kind of turn our focus to the first episode of this podcast, which is going to be sort of a deep dive into buying your first primary residence. We're going to focus on primary residence for the first episode. And hopefully cover all the
bases to get
all
into
the
it. Yeah.
do's and don'ts and sort of tips and tricks and hacks that.
And I've done do's and don'ts when it comes to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a lot of home owning lessons the hard way. I continue to.
Yeah.
So great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of end this intro here, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys soon. Thank you.
This is your co-host, Patrick Diamond. I'm a vice president and certified financial planner with Wealth Management Resources in Smithfield, Rhode Island, where I serve our investment customers as an investment advisor representative. My co-host is Ralph DIBugnara. Ralph serves as president of Home Qualified, the digital resource for buyers, sellers, and real estate agents. He's also vice president at Cardinal Financial, a nationally recognized mortgage loan company, and he's the recent author of The Growth Trap, a continuous plan to avoid the traps of life and build a better you. Our discussion is not tied to the offer or sale of any investment products or products in general. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be legal, tax, or investment advice.